Alright everyone, so far what we have done is we have built this particular application up to this point. We have our banner sorted, we have our movie component and our movie cards sorted, right? So these are all our card, this is our banner, and this looks a pretty decent UI, right? So now what is the objective of this module? So in this module we'll be understanding on how to work with real-time APIs, and before actually moving to work with real-time APIs and basically working around with all of those data, first we need to understand useEffect hook. Yes, useEffect hook is a very important React hook which will basically make your work very efficient, right? So let's get started and let's see that what this hook is and what it does and how it can be useful to you, right? So what I have done over here is, if you see, I've created this particular demo application, right? A very small demo application. It does much, right? So what it do is, basically if I go over here and if I write something, so whatever I'm writing over here, it will just take that text and it will print it out, right? Word by word, letter by letter. And if I click on this increment button, so it will basically increment the count, right? So these are the two functionalities that this particular app has, right? So basically you can see the basic code over here, very basic app. So I have just got the counter code and I have just got the text code, right? The input field code. That's it. And I'm managing two state over here. So one state is for your count and one state is for your text. So I'm managing all of this, right? Very basic application. Now we need to understand about the useEffect hook. So before moving to what it does, how it will do it, first let's see the behavior of useEffect, right? So before, when we used to work with class-based components in React, there used to be these concepts known as component mounting, component unmounting, component updating, all of these things, right? These were known as lifecycle methods, right? But all of these lifecycle methods can be managed by just using one hook, that is your useEffect hook. Yes, it's that powerful, right? So basically we'll be talking about all of these things one by one, but let's just see what the useEffect will do. So first, I have already imported useEffect over here, you can see, right? So use state has been also imported, useEffect has also been imported. So what I will do is I'll just write useEffect for you in this code, right? And then we'll see some changes, then we'll see the behavior of useEffect. Okay, so the code over here will be, first let's talk about the syntax, that how you can actually write this particular hook, syntax of useEffect, right? So the syntax of useEffect is pretty straightforward. You do not have to do anything, you just have to write useEffect, right? This expects an arrow function, right? So over here you can just provide arrow function, and this is the entirely the syntax of useEffect. That's it, useEffect, and inside useEffect you have arrow function. Now what we need to do, so over here I'll just do one thing, right? So I'll just console.log the number of count, right? Basically the count variable. I'll just write useEffect runs, right? And over here I'll just print my count in my title. So I'll just use my document and I'll say document.title, and for document.title I'll just say button clicked for count times, right? Something like that. Like that. That's it, right? So I'm doing a very basic thing over here. What I'm doing is, over here you can see your increment button. So whenever I'll click on increment button, my count will increase, and as my count will increase, the useEffect will run and it will just print the count in my title, right, by this text. So button clicked for count times. So whatever is my count, it will just print it over here, right? So let's just check this out. So over here you can see at the top, here is our title, button clicked for 0 times. Right now the count is 0 as well. So if I just click on increment, notice what will happen. If I click on increment, the count is increasing first, right? Basically this state is increasing first. I mean, this value is increasing first, and after that, after a very minute delay, this particular number is increasing, right? Notice this. If I click on increment again, 2, and then you see after a delay, after a very minute delay, this is increasing, right? And what does that means? What does that proves? That proves that useEffect will always run after everything has happened, right? useEffect will run at the end. No matter how, wherever you have written it, it will run at the end, right? So let's check this out again. So if I go to my console as well, so over here I'll just refresh everything. Now notice, as I refresh, so what I'm doing is I'm starting my application again, right? Everything is refreshed, everything is fresh right now. But still you see, there is one console log statement that says useEffect runs, right? And what does that proves? That proves that useEffect, no matter what you're doing, when you start your application, useEffect will run for the first time, right? You do not have to run it manually. If you have a useEffect in your particular project, it will run automatically when you start your application, right? So these two things are clear, right? So let's say that this, where I click on this increment, so this actually increments, and this increments the count by one time, and again the useEffect runs, right? Now, why is this happening? What are we accomplishing with this, right? That's basically the part. So let's figure it out. Great. So useEffect runs. If I can keep on incrementing, that means if I keep on incrementing the count, useEffect runs, right? Whatever time I can increment this, the useEffect will run. Then if I go to this text area and if I type something, then do you think the useEffect will run? Let's test this out. You see, yes. I mean, whatever letter I'm typing over here, the useEffect is running for those particular letters, for those particular keystrokes, for those particular events. That means that this useEffect, right? If you have a useEffect in your application like this, whatever state changes you're doing, it will always run. Plus, it will always run for the first time as well, right? As soon as you start your application, useEffect will run, and then whatever changes you will make, for those changes as well, the useEffect hook will run, right? This particular syntax proves it, right? This particular code proves that. But now, do we want this useEffect to run for every time? No, right? Because suppose that we just want it to run for this count variable, that we want this useEffect to only run when this counter has changed. We do not want this to change when our text is changing, right? Because see, whenever I'm doing the count thing, whenever I'm doing the text thing, this useEffect is running always. So for that, what do we have over here? We have something known as a dependency array, right? But before moving to dependency array, what is this behavior? First, let's talk about this behavior. So first thing was component mounting. And what is component mounting? The first render of your component, right? Whenever you start your application, it renders for the first time. So for the first time, your useEffect will run. That is the concept of component mounting, that your component has mounted. Second thing is when you saw that whenever we are updating any element, whenever we are updating anything in our component, right? Whether it is the count, whether it is the text, useEffect is running again, right? Let me show this to you again. Increment, it's running. If I change text, it's running, right? So this particular thing shows that whenever you're going to update anything, and that is actually known as component update. So, and component update. So this particular useEffect, the default behavior of useEffect is that it will always run when your component mounts, and it will always run when your component updates as well, right? So this is the behavior of useEffect. But sometimes it happens that you do not want this to update, right? There is nothing, I mean, we're not accomplishing anything by writing this and update and running useEffect every time we are writing some text, we are increasing our counter. No, we're not accomplishing anything. So that's why what we can do is we can actually make this useEffect dependent as well, right? And that's what, and how can we achieve that? We can achieve that with using a dependency array. Yes. So let me write this again. So if I just copy this and if I write this useEffect again over here, and I'll just comment this useEffect out, right? And over here, what I will do is I'll just go and I'll add a dependency array. Dependency array is nothing but an empty array that you can pass it over here, right? You can hover over this and you can see that this particular array, I mean, it was just visible. I mean, you can hover over this and it will show you the details, right? So this is your dependency array. So now look at this syntax and look at this syntax, right? There's only one difference. We have added a dependency array. Now let's check that what will happen. So if I go back And if I now refresh everything, useEffect runs. That means whenever your component will mount for the first time, it will always run. But now notice, if I increment, my state is changing, but useEffect is nowhere. useEffect is not running right now, right? You can see this particular 0, this is still 0, the title is 0, and you're not seeing anything. You're not seeing anything from the useEffect in your console as well, right? So useEffect is not running right now. So that means when you add a dependency array, you just restrict your useEffect to component mounting, right? So only your useEffect will run when your component mounts. That's it. It will basically not run when you're updating anything, right? If you have added a empty dependency array. But now the third case is that what if you add some dependency in this array, right? Suppose I have two states right now, right? One state is for my count, one state is for my text. Now I only want this useEffect to run when my count updates, but I do not want this to run when my text updates, right? So how can I do that? That's where your dependency array will come into the picture. You can just say that run this useEffect when my count value is updating, and you can just pass the value count over here, so that whenever this value will update, only then your useEffect will run, right? So let's check this out as well. So if I just go over here, if I refresh this, useEffect runs because mounting is a default behavior, right? Then if I do the text thing, if I go over here and if I write any text, useEffect is not running at all. useEffect is not running at all. But if I now click on increment, see what will happen. Now your useEffect has started running again, right? And it also reflects over here in the title and in your console as well, right? So this is how what you can do is you can make use of useEffect, right? useEffect, if you do not add anything, it will work like component mounting and component update. Both the things will be combined and it will work like that only, right? It will basically show both the behaviors. Now, if you just want to have mounting behavior, you can just add a dependency array and it will just run when your application mounts, when your component mounts. And then if you want this useEffect to run for certain states, for certain state changes, right? If you want this to run for count, you can also add text. So now this will start working for your text changes, right? So if I just go over here and if I refresh, and if I increment, it will not run, but if I change my text, now your useEffect will run, right? So you can make this dependent as well on certain particular values. That's why this array is known as the dependency array, right? But now you may be thinking, what is the use of this? So sometimes what happens is we have to do some heavy operations, right? So basically we are going to work with an API, we are going to communicate with an API, we are going to get that data. So what will happen is as this useEffect runs at the end, so what will happen? First we'll render out all of our HTML code, JSX code, everything will happen. Then your useEffect will run and it will get the data from the API and it will mount. When your component mounts, it will run, get the data and it will populate it, right? And then you can make use of different states that okay, when something changes, so basically when to run useEffect on what state changes. So all of these things you can decide then, right? So this is why this particular hook is very important, and when we'll be using this in your project, you'll be able to get a better understanding of this as well, right? See you on the next lecture.